What's up? What's up? I've been thinking a lot. We live in an age today of unprecedented comfort, information, and optionality. But despite all of this at our fingertips, anxiety, depression, confusion, and meaninglessness are at historic highs. And that's definitely not a coincidence. We're not just optimized for comfort alone, we are narrative creatures, I believe. We need stories that tell us who we are, what is expected of us, and why this all matters. So, through most of human history, societies provided these stories, these archetypes, these moral guidelines through myth, ritual, and initiation. It would just carry down until we actually started writing it. But in some ways, those structures are fairly flipped today in the age of instant content. Just noise, infinite information, moral confusion, and identity without responsibility. And I wanted to talk about how I'm architecting a coherent life that integrates body, mind, and purpose. Those are my three grounding themes. And I use a combination of psychology, physiology, leadership, and narrative science while also drawing carefully from ancient archetypes as maps, not fantasies. And the central claim is a meaningful life is built through progressive responsibility. First to the body, then to the mind, and finally to the future, to others. So I think modern life produces weak stories, and it's a damn shame because they're so important for human development, all of our aspirations and dreams. Psychologists have known for decades that humans understand their lives through narrative. It shows that we do not experience life as raw events. We experience it with characters, causality, and meaning. When people lack a coherent life story, they experience fragmentation, anxiety, and aimlessness. Sociologists call this condition anami. I think I'm pronouncing that right. A breakdown of social norms and moral guidance. Modernity removed traditional constraints and initiation rituals, but didn't replace them with an equally rigorous alternative. And the result is we have immense freedom, but in some ways, very little direction. I mean, from a young age, we're told to be ourselves, but I don't know if that's really actually encouraged. Follow our passions and our dreams, but not necessarily the step by step focus and discipline when you can go in a million different directions. How do you even cultivate discipline and focus? Of course, follow your passions, seek happiness. But what does that actually mean? Like, how do we actually find meaning and responsibility and contribution and overall life satisfaction rather than the immediate pleasures that are all around us? Without structure, without ideas about this, people tend to default to contradiction, wanting success without sacrifice, purpose without effort, strength without discipline. And that's one of the hard truths about our culture today. And this is where Joseph Campbell's hero's journey had a profound effect on me. He basically analyzed the core myths across the world and found that the hero kind of goes through a journey in all these different cultures, whether it's Heracles in Greek tradition or Beowulf, they all kind of go through several steps. And I think it's a useful tool to understand human development. It's a narrative and psychological framework describing how individuals can transform through challenge. And here are the 12 core stages. Okay, so one is the ordinary world where things start. This is baseline life before change. The hero is incomplete but stable. So this establishes context and also limits. Number two is the call to adventure, which is a disruption, a problem, an opportunity, a crisis, and the signals mismatch between the current life and the potential. Initially, there's a refusal of the call, where there's fear, doubt, and rationalization. But then you tend to meet a mentor where you get guidance, tools, or perspective, and that mentor transfers knowledge which reduces fatal error. And after that is crossing the threshold, which is commitment, the point of no return, converting intention into action. Following that are tests, finding allies, and also understanding your enemies. And then, before the core ordeal, there's a preparation. And then there is the ordeal, which is the central crisis, where the identity breaks and reforms. And this is transformation via loss and integration. After this is the reward, the seizing of the sword, which is insight, capability, and value gained. And then starts the road back, where the consequences of your actions, as well as responsibility, emerge. And following that is the resurrection, which is the final proving, the old self versus the new self, which stabilizes transformation. And the hero's journey concludes with returning with the elixir. The hero brings value back, and individual growth becomes social good. And just to highlight this with an example, I'm going to take our boy Karn from the previous episode where I detailed characters from India's great epic, the Mahābhārata. So I assume that many of you are not familiar with this, but just bear with me, and you can listen to that previous episode to get an idea of this tragic hero. He's a great archer and warrior in Indian mythology. So Karn is raised as a charioteer son, gifted, honorable, yet socially marginalized despite his divine birth. So that's his ordinary world. That's where his story starts. And then he gets the call to adventure, which is an unrelenting drive to prove his worth through mastery of warfare. But he has a refusal, which is he accepts a lower social identity rather than claiming privilege, choosing dignity over revelation. And he has a great mentor, which is Lord Parshuram, the sixth avatar of the supreme god Vishnu and a master warrior. And that's when he starts crossing the threshold, where he aligns with Duryodhan, who is the antagonist of the Mahābhārata, who grants him kingship and enters power through loyalty. And through this, he meets other allies, the other 99 brothers of Duryodhan, as well as his rivalry with his, as of yet, unknown half-brother Arjun. Before the war, Lord Krishna reveals this to him, which is the approach to the innermost cave. And the ordeal is, he refuses the offer to preserve loyalty and social order. And in battle, his chariot wheel sinks. The memory of his weapons mantras fails, and he faces death stripped of advantage. The reward, though, is moral clarity. Karn keeps faith with his chosen dharma, his duty, his principle, even when it costs him victory and life. And the road back, or the resurrection part for him, would be posthumous recognition. His 5 half-brothers, the Pandavas, the protagonists of the story, learn the truth, and his stature rises beyond faction. And then the return with the elixir, and this is ethical, not triumphal. Dharma can demand loss, and character is revealed when outcomes are unjust. So it's a rough example, but I'm sure you could do the same thing with Odysseus or Osiris. You get the picture. We need heroes. That's what I feel like is missing today. Heroes are not celebrities or conquerors or narcissists. They represent someone who voluntarily accepts responsibility, confronts adversity, and emerges transformed. Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey is often oversimplified, as I just did, but the core insight holds. Transformation requires departure, trial, and return. You leave comfort, endure difficulty, and return with something of value. Plato actually expressed a similar idea when he wrote that society would not be just until philosophers became kings and kings became philosophers. He was not advocating rule by elites. He was describing the integration of strength, wisdom, and restraint. And across cultures, whether it's the Hindu concept of dharma, the samurai code of Bushido, or Stoic philosophy, The hero is someone who acts according to his or her role, appropriate responsibility, not personal whim. And that's what I'm all about: warrior, monarch, and guru, functional archetypes that emerge across a human's life. The warrior archetype begins with the body, not because violence is virtuous, but because capacity precedes responsibility. Neuroscience and physiology are clear on this point. Cognitive function, emotional regulation, and impulse control are deeply tied to physical health. Chronic sleep deprivation, sedentary behavior, poor nutrition, and unmanaged stress degrade executive function. You can't think clearly or act ethically when your nervous system is chronically dysregulated. Large scale studies show that regular physical activity reduces depression and anxiety, what we talked about earlier, improving cognitive flexibility and increasing self efficacy, the belief that one's actions truly matter. Self efficacy is one of the strongest predictors of long term success across domains. Martial arts, athletics, disciplined physical practice, they've all been described as philosophy in motion. Bruce Lee himself described martial arts as a mean of self expression and self knowledge, not domination. Warrior cultures all across the world understood that discipline of the body trains discipline of the mind. So the warrior is not someone who seeks conflict. The warrior is someone who can endure it without becoming corrupted by it. And health is not vanity. It's a moral obligation to the future version of yourself and to the people who may one day depend on you. And for me, especially, when everything else was going wrong or is going wrong, going back to health, preservation, improving myself physically always led to a myriad of benefits that far surpass just the body. So, if the warrior establishes internal order, the monarch governs external responsibility. Leadership research consistently shows that power amplifies existing traits. Without self regulation and humility, power degrades judgment. Behavioral economics demonstrates that people in positions of authority are more prone to overconfidence, reduced empathy, and moral licensing unless explicit constraints are in place. The monarch, the king or the queen, is not about dominance, it's about stewardship. Legitimacy comes not just from strength or mind alone, but from justice, foresight, restraint, and empathy. Decision making under uncertainty is unavoidable at this stage. Most meaningful decisions in our life, career, relationships, moral stands, are made without full information, and some of us agonize. I'm guilty of this over the perfect decision. And research by Daniel Kahneman, for example, shows that humans are predictably biased under uncertainty, favoring short term certainty over long term value. So I use tools like premortems, second order thinking, and feedback systems to counter these biases. And that's where the idea of like a board of advisors for yourself, mentors, peers, dissenting voices, people that really know you and can say no or give you critical feedback appear. I don't think anyone can govern wisely alone. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger actually said this. He said, "No man is an island. There's no such thing as a self made man. If you can't govern yourself, you will govern others poorly. And if you cannot tolerate being wrong, you will make others pay for your mistakes." So, absolutely, you got to take care of your health and every part of it holistically, not just physically, but nutrition wise, socially, emotionally, financially. And then you got to take care of your mind, really understand mental models and biases and decision making and leadership and teamwork, how to work together in tribes and troops of people, how to balance relationships, how to navigate conversations. Like, absolutely, these two pieces are so crucial for living a purpose filled life, which brings me to my final heroic archetype, the guru. Now, this is a fairly strong archetype in India, and you'll see that these actually follow, in some ways, the traditional outline of a good life in India. The guru emerges when the focus shifts from beyond personal success to contribution and meaning. There is a clear distinguishing factor between happiness and meaning. Happiness correlates a lot with comfort and pleasure. Meaning, on the other hand, doesn't distance itself from struggle, responsibility, and service. And people who orient their lives around meaning and impact tend to report greater life satisfaction over time, even when life is difficult. Take Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl. He observed that those who survived extreme suffering were not necessarily the strongest or the happiest, but those who found meaning and responsibility to others, to values, to a future they might never see. The quote, I think, is society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they will never appreciate. The guru, once you've achieved success with your mind and body and the ability to lead people, it's really just what can you give back to our human species? What can you do good for the world? And that's really wise. The task is not control, but transmission, teaching, building, and creating systems and institutions that outlast you. That's the legacy. And I think this framework is especially relevant. Again, I'm a guy, I'm a man, to modern masculinity because I think there's been a stripping of clear expectations and healthy initiation. Young men benefit from structured challenge, mentorship, and responsibility. And when those are absent, energy turns inward as depression or outward as aggression. This is just unmanaged weakness. True masculinity is about capacity, restraint, and responsibility, not domination. And Stoicism, I think it's often misunderstood. It's not emotional suppression, it's teaching you to focus on what is within one's control, acceptance of hardship, and ethical action regardless of outcome. Society without demanding ideals produces fragile people. We all know this, right? Strong men create good times create weak men create hard times create strong men, something like that. The balance is difficult, but it is necessary. I think action creates example. So example over time becomes legend. And we hear this all the time now. Everyone's saying, oh, king, queen energy, legend. Legend retold becomes myth, and myth shapes the next generation's imagination. And for me, a man is in control. He respects, and yeah, he might be less about feelings and insecurities and fear of danger because Stoicism focuses on solving problems and what you can actually control, what's in your circle of control. It's okay to be silent, you know. In many ways, I feel like a lot of boys are self-deprecating, hyperactive, and emotional today when they would benefit from being more assertive. And it's seen in our heroes. There's a lack of tough life experiences to write good heroes today, which leads men to being lessened in some ways, to be less threatening and less competent. I think men have something to offer that isn't destructive, which includes power, protection, and providing. And they don't need to be hyper roided out junkies, but they can still value honor, loyalty, and chivalry. And it's tough because I mean, who wouldn't rather be sedated? Because we're tired of the news and social media and moral battles in every single choice we make, whether it's what we eat, what we choose to consume. Sheesh. This leads to a pretty confusing society where we don't know how to be what we are, even those that claim that they know. A man, for example, might say they want to help the world, which is a very noble, altruistic trait, but end up helping themselves. They might say they want to work hard only to party, denying pleasure but hate woman, and all matter of contradictory statements. So be in true service, because through action, man becomes hero, and through death, hero becomes legend, and through time, legend becomes myth. Through learning myth, you can take action. Toxic masculinity, I believe, isn't the presence of manhood, it's the absence of it. Men today say they help others, but they help themselves. They want to help society, yet they escape from it. They think about teamwork, but are hostile. The virtuous men, I believe, are leaving society rather than helping it. Okay. Purposeful life, self-righteous discipline, but that's all focused on their own selfish goals. They focus on working hard and avoiding pleasure only to seek it later and go into a spiral. And man, I think that's why heroes are important. Warriors, kings, gurus. Heroes are willing to sacrifice for a greater cause, embodying courage, compassion, justice, wisdom, protect others, take on leadership, accepting responsibility, making decisions for the greater good, seeking higher knowledge, and often guiding others, doing something good, being the best version of themselves. And I think that's really important. And I'll finish on this. We need heroes, and you can be one too.